afternoon, everyone, and for those of you on the West Coast, good morning. I'm Tom Harnish, Director of State Relations and Policy Analysis at the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, a national association of over 400 public colleges and universities throughout the country committed to providing broad access to affordable, high-quality college opportunities. ASCU is pleased to partner with the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education for this webinar entitled The Midwest and the Northeast, Advancing the Public College and University Mission Amid Population Loss. This webinar will explore the changing demographic patterns in the United States with a particular focus on the Northeast and Midwest. This webinar is based on the new Knocking on the College Door report recently released by WICHE. As many of you know from the headlines, the Northeast and Midwest have been challenged with slowing and declining populations in some of their regions and communities, which have affected their respective higher education systems and other institutions of higher learning. These demographic trends have the potential to dramatically reshape higher education. How will institutions respond to this changing demographic environment? We are pleased today to have one of the authors of the Knocking on the College Door report, as well as two college presidents who have effectively responded to these demographic trends. First, we have Colleen Falkenstern. She's a research coordinator at WICHE and one of the authors of the Knocking on the College Door report. We also have Dr. Fritz Erickson, who is the president of Northern Michigan University. And prior to joining Northern Michigan University, he served as provost and vice president for academic affairs at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan. And he's also held higher education positions at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, Eastern Michigan University, and Michigan Tech. We are also pleased to have on the webinar Dr. Glenn Cummings, president of the University of Southern Maine. Prior to joining the University of Southern Maine, he was interim president of the University of Maine at Augusta. Dr. Cummings has also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary with the U.S. Department of Education in the Obama administration. He has also served as President and Executive Director of the Goodwill Hinckley Organization, a historic 121-year-old school for high school youth located in Maine, as well as being a former Speaker of the House in the Maine House of Representatives. So we'd like to get right into it today, but before we do, we have a poll that we would like you to fill out for those of you on the line. And the first question is, are you with, please select one, a public 2-year college, a public 4-year college, other college, or not a college at all, and you can simply fill that in the comment box. And with that, I'll turn it over to Colleen to talk about the national demographic trends as well as the trends specifically for the Northeast and Midwest.
Thank you, Tom, and to the audience, good afternoon and welcome. First, a few housekeeping things. All attendees will be muted to avoid background noise, but you should be able to hear at this point. Since attendees are muted, we encourage you to submit questions or comments using the question box on your webinar control panel, including technical issues, and we'll help you resolve them if we can. We are recording this webinar and will email a link to the recording soon after the webinar. I will now speak to the high school graduate trends. Before we get started, WICHE would like to thank ACT and College Board for their generous financial support, which help us produce the Knocking at the College Door high school graduate projections and dissemination of the information such as in webinars like this. The data about projected high school graduates you are about to see include actual reported counts of high school graduates, generally through the class of 2013, and projections of graduates for classes of 2014 to 2032. In the simplest terms, we use the reported actual number of graduates and the reported number of students enrolled in school and recently born to project the number of graduates. If you are interested in detailed technical information, it is available in the full report at www.knocking.wiche.edu. And please do submit questions in the question box. On this chart, the confirmed counts of graduates are shown in the lighter shaded line, and the projected years are in the darker line portion. As shown here, the U.S. is in a period of slowdown in the number of high school graduates. After 15 years of steady increases, from around 2.5 million in 1996 to 3.47 million in 2013, the data predict that the annual number of U.S. high school graduates has leveled out at around 3.4 to 3.5 million graduates. The number of graduates per year nationally are projected to average around 3.4 million through the year 2023, before peaking at 3.56 million prior to the year 2026. This peak, fueled by an increase in the number of non-white high school graduates, represents a 3% increase in the number of graduates over the previous high of 3.47 million graduates in 2013. New federal projections of high school graduates released just last week confirm this general trend, with a little more generous projection for about 3.6 million graduates by 2025. Beyond the year 2026, the number of high school graduates in the U.S. will decline by about 8% to 3.25 million as fewer children born during the Great Recession and the subsequent recovery enter high school through the early 2030s. In other words, by the early 2030s, we may be down to about the number of graduates as around 2008. Graduates from private religious and non-sectarian schools are projected to decline at an even greater rate than the overall trend. WICHE's projections and those produced by the Federal Department of Education indicate that there will be between 10 to 20% fewer high school graduates by the early 2030s, predicted in the greatest extent by declines among Catholic and other religious schools. This displays the total number of graduates by region beginning with 2001. Today's webinar is about the states that are projected to face declines in the number of high school graduates for a number of years, and those states are predominantly in the Midwest and the Northeast. The Midwest and the Northeast reached their high in the number of graduates around 2008, 2009, and are projected to have almost a half percentage point fewer graduates per year on average going forward. Although the overall trend of decline is similar between the two regions, I do want to briefly highlight variation between these regions. The Midwest trend is heavily influenced by its three largest states in the region, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio. All three of these states are not projected to increase after 2011-12. Through 2025, increases in several smaller states in the region helps mitigate the decrease in graduates from the most populous states. However, similar to the national trend, most states in the region are expected to see decreases after 2025, resulting in the dip that you can see on the regional line in this chart. The Midwest does have some states, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, and Minnesota, that are expected to increase or stay relatively the same by the end of the projections. The Northeastern region is a slightly different story than the Midwest. The overall regional decrease in the Northeast is the result of decreases among all states throughout the projection period. Only one state, New York, is projected to have a new high in the number of graduates at any point during these projections in 2025, but even New York is expected to decrease overall by 2032. Of course, there is considerable variation by state, even from the regional trends. These maps summarize whether each state will have fewer or more graduates overall at 3 points in time compared to the class of 2013. Warmer gold or bronze colors indicate larger graduating classes than 2013, while white shading means relatively the same in number compared to 2013, and the blue shading means fewer graduates are projected for the year displayed compared to 2013. The first map shows the year 2020, which reflects the relative flattening in the number of graduates that is currently underway, with relatively few states showing increases, including most states in the Midwest and the Northeast. The bottom map shows 2025 compared to 2013. This is the year of the next highest number of graduates for the nation, and the majority of states are predicted to have larger graduating classes in 2025 than 2013. Here you see the variation in the Midwest, with growth in states like Nebraska and Kansas and strong declines in Michigan and Ohio. You also see the concentration of decline in the Northeast, where all states outside of New York are expected to decrease by this year. The map on the right shows that by the early 2030s, there are many more states with the cooler blues and whites, including almost all states in the Midwest and the Northeast, because by then the nation and most states are projected to have fewer graduates than in 2013 in relation to the recent birth declines. In general, the fewer number of high school graduates overall for the nation and many states are predicted in large part by decreasing numbers of white youth. That is indicated here in the blue bars, showing that 6 to 14% fewer white high school graduates are projected between 2020 and 2032 compared to 2013. Add to this the declines of private high school graduates, shown here in the set of gray bars on the right. Meanwhile, growing numbers of Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander graduates offsets the decreasing number of white high school graduates, nationally at least. In 2020 and the years leading up to it, strong offsetting increases of Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander high school graduates leads to the overall flat trend we saw in previous slides. By 2025, the surge in Hispanic high school graduates plus 14% increase in the number of Asian Pacific Islander graduates offsets the fewer number of white and private high school graduates by almost 2 to 1, which is what accounts for the short period of growth that looked like a bump in the previous slides. But by 2032, recent steep decreases in the numbers of babies being born indicates that there will be contraction in high school graduates in the early 2030s in every type except Asian Pacific Islander high school graduates. Nationally, there will be slightly fewer Black high school graduates in most of the projected years, and American Indian, Alaska Native graduates are also projected to decline in number. Now we will take a quick state-by-state glance at this theme of strong declines of white high school graduates at the same time that graduates of other races and ethnicities generally increase in number. These charts show the average annual number of fewer or more high school graduates between 2025 compared to 2013. I will start with the Midwest. The 3 largest Midwest states, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, you see that the increases of Hispanic Asian Pacific Islander graduates are not enough to offset the greater decreases of white, private, and in the case of Illinois and Michigan, Black high school graduates. This is leading to the overall decline in each of these states. In the next largest Midwest states, like Indiana, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, plus some of the other smaller states, the quite strong average annual increase in Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander graduates offsets the declines in the majority white populations, and this will be enough to keep the overall total number of graduates steady or with moderate increases. Here you see the trends for the Northeastern region. New York is off to the left on a different number scale than the other states. On an average annual basis, increasing numbers of Hispanic and Asian Pacific Islander graduates virtually offsets the decreasing numbers of white and private high school graduates in New York. In none of the other Northeast states is increases of non-white graduates strong enough to buffer the greater decreases of white and private school graduates. However, as you can see in this chart, in other larger Northeastern states, including New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, there is expected to be increases among non-white populations, signaling that although the number of high school graduates is expected to decrease in these states, the graduating classes are expected to diversify throughout the projections. Among the smallest Northeastern states, Maine and Rhode Island are expected to have minimal increases of non-white high school graduates, while Vermont and New Hampshire are expected to see decreases among all high school graduate populations. It is important to note that while non-white graduates are growing in number, minority students continue to graduate at lower than average rates of graduation. The numbers I presented would be even greater if minority and male students graduated at least at the average rate. WICHE just released new, more detailed projections for male and female graduates available at knocking.wiche.edu, which help to quantify how graduation gaps for minorities and males hold back the total possible number of graduates. And that concludes the description of high school graduate trends. I will leave these long-term views of the Midwest and the Northeast region on screen momentarily while I pause to see if we have any questions in the queue that need immediate action. And I will now turn it over to our colleague from Northern Michigan University, President Dr. Fritz Erickson.
Thank you very much, Colleen. It's a real delight to be here. although I'm now even more depressed about demographic trends than I was before I sat down. It is a pretty bleak picture that we paint, and those of us that are in the business of recruiting and educating and graduating students have some pretty significant challenges. And in our area, we're expecting a 10% decline of high school graduates just over the next 8 years. And when you put that on top of the idea that for a 10-year period, for the last 10 years at Northern Michigan University, we've had entering freshman class declines of anywhere between 1% and 6%. So we have a long run of decline, and we have a long run of decline at the time we should have been growing. So when I stepped into this position, it was just remarkably clear that we had to do something radically different, that we couldn't just turn on a faucet and do the same kinds of things that we'd always been doing. We really needed to take a very, very different approach to our recruitment and retention of students. Colleen, if you could go to the next slide. So we started down the process, and oh, by the way, we've done pretty well with this out of the gate. This year we saw for the first time a real enrollment in our FIDIACs for this fall, which has been a great success story on campus. The campus community has really rallied around it. And we've put into place a multi-pronged action plan. Next. So the first thing we did is when we started down this journey was we recognized that there was no magic wand that we could just wave and students would come. No matter how much we love the institution, we had to do things pretty different. So we started by really engaging the community, and we literally spent a year as a university community talking about our core values. So what are the things that really define us? We revised our mission and vision statement, and we created a strategic plan that we titled Investing in Innovation. And we were really clear about why we wanted to title it Investing in Innovation, because everyone on the campus was really tired of budget cuts. 10, 12, 15 years of budget cuts just really challenges the very core of who we are. And it's been a long time since we've cut the fat from anything, as so many institutions have had. And so after we did the core values, mission, and vision, the next year we did our strategic plan, heavily engaged the campus community, and really used the line a lot, the courage and vision to lead transformational change. That we weren't going to go about this in a safe way. We were going to really take some risks and move forward. By the way, this year we're involved in a comprehensive strategic resource allocation process. Not a budget reduction process, but a way of looking at how every dollar is spent on campus to figure out how we can continue what we're doing with investing in programs and freeing up dollars and looking at ways of doing things, again, differently. Next slide, please. So student recruitment involved a couple of things right from the get-go. First, we really felt we needed to take a strong look at academic programs and make sure that we were offering programs that were new and exciting, not to the detriment of some of our terrific existing programs, but programs that we thought would really catch catch fire and really enthuse everyone. So, for example, we started forensic anthropology, but we didn't just start forensic anthropology. We launched the first cold weather forensic research site anywhere in the world. For all the forensic work that's done, there's none that's done in cold weather. And so we started what is affectionately known as the Body Farm, which has just been a remarkable thing for the community to rally around and for the university. Now, will this one program, solve our enrollment problems? No, but the enthusiasm that it created has been contagious. So contagious that our friends in chemistry decided that we should be the first university in the country to start a 4-year degree program in medicinal plant chemistry. And we had to provide our board of trustees assurances that we would not break the law, because this is very much driven around the medical marijuana industry. And marijuana is not legalized in Michigan, but the techniques for studying medicinal plants and the compounding and all the work that goes with that. Again, we had the advantage of creating something really exciting and really help the campus community understand that we were willing to invest in really innovative and different kinds of things. We started a new autism and behavior analysis and research center. There's virtually no community support for children with autism in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And this has received great support from the state in doing this. Cybersecurity. We started a sustainable advisory committee. You can go through the whole list. And probably one of the biggest things we did was we started what's called the Educational Access Network, and I'll talk about that in a moment or two. We also targeted new student markets, hired a chief diversity officer for the first time in our history. We are expanding graduate programs, work towards online, expanding a new model of international. All of these things to target new student groups. Next slide, please. One of the things we took on that certainly is not for the faint of heart, we decided to throw out our long-standing logo and develop a complete new branding and identity for the university. And it was done magnificently by our marketing department in collaboration with academic affairs. So we ended up with new branding, new logos, new market, and most importantly, a very different way of marketing. And without casting dispersion on my colleagues at other institutions, most institutional marketing is pretty blasé. Our folks have done just an amazing job. We put a creative team together and gave them wide range to come up with new ideas. And we've driven most of our marketing around the sense of location. And if you're not familiar with Northern Michigan University, we're located on the shores of Lake Superior, the largest body of fresh water in the world. One thing that we have more than most places is snow and ice climbing and sled dog racing and skiing and all of that. And we decided, instead of running away from that, that we would embrace it. We also started 4 new sports. People thought we were a little crazy because most places cut sports to deal with budgets. We did exactly the opposite. And it's been a real boon because it's increased enrollment, and the net revenue produced by the investments in new sports and coaches has paid off very, very well. And besides, we get some just terrific students. I mean, we added women's golf and men's swimming and diving and men's soccer. And my personal favorite was women's lacrosse, which in this part of the country is not a very big sport, but I think we've set the standard that my friends at other institutions are looking to follow. We also paid a lot of attention to facilities, and we have a new academic building, new nursing labs, new media centers, put a lot of emphasis in renovation. In fact, today they're moving in 150 new trees on campus because we thought it would spruce things up. We had a donor that was able to fund that. Probably the biggest thing we did, though, was we started a new residence hall complex that the students have affectionately called the Woods. They like saying we live in the woods. This fall we opened 2 of the buildings. 2 will open in the winter and 2 next fall. I'll talk about those a little bit. Next slide, please. There's nothing quite like putting a couple of cranes in the air to excite the campus community. And so this is an image of our new lodge that is the front door for our, what we think is the finest living learning environment that you can find anywhere in the country. And we did this with someone else's money. We were the first institution in Michigan to take this on and do this as a public-private partnership. Our private partner put up almost $80 million to build this, and we've developed a financial model that allows us to carry no debt, to keep our costs down for students. We were actually able to develop amazing residence halls with only modest increases to our residence hall rates. Had we done the same thing and renovated existing dorms, we would have had to increase the residence hall rates by 30 to 35%. So this has been just really exciting. It's captivated the community, and many of our sister institutions have been up looking around and figuring out how we've done this, because this has been truly remarkable for us. The other thing we did is we thought, well, maybe we ought to do more in terms of online. And but when you live in a rural community, not everybody has access to high-speed internet. So we did something that nobody else is doing. We decided to provide the internet to 21,000 square miles. Next slide. Let's give you a little bit of an example. We worked with the FCC, and you see all of these circles. We received the educational broadband spectrum in all of these areas. And you can see where our sites currently are, and we're building these out. We captured the imagination of our governor and the Michigan Economic Development Council. They walked in with $6.5 million and said, we want to solve high-speed educational internet and make it available to all members in rural communities. It has had a pronounced impact, not only on providing educational access, but on engaging people with the university. So we have many wonderful partners with the K-12 communities, because we provide a very low cost, high-speed educational internet for K-12 students. And of course, we're not above sharing who brought them this service and all the great things that are going on at Northern. Next slide. Just to give you some idea that these are the student populations that we're targeting. And this doesn't count the community members that we see as part of our service area. So we're getting a lot of community members that are coming back to school. And that means different things to different people. Next slide. Of course, the least expensive thing to do is keep students. So we put enormous amount of efforts in retention. Part of retention, in my mind, has always been making sure students really are engaged with the university and the community. And that has been a big part of what we've done. We've done things, everything from centralized advising for freshmen. We implemented Starfish. We created a retention committee that has access to resources to try things out. So the fact that we've now set an all-time record for first-time full-time baccalaureate freshmen has been really important part of our enrollment strategy. Next slide. And of course, one of the great things is we live in what we think is the most beautiful place you can imagine, on the shores of Lake Superior. And the outdoor learning is very much part of who we are. And so we work very hard for great town-gown relations. We engage our students with the community and with all of the things that make living and studying in a place like Marquette truly special. And we really share that with as many different people as we possibly can. Next slide, please. So we've had a lot of successes, and we've had it because we've been strategic. Everything we've done is strategic. We don't, we're willing to take risks. We're willing to fail on things, and I didn't want to list all the things I failed on here because I would be a little embarrassed. But we just tried different things. For example, we put $1 million up and called it a program investment fund, and made it available to anybody on campus who had an idea for a new program. And that has been just remarkable because people feel that they can come up with an idea and there'll be funding for it. And most of the areas it's been really successful. The last thing I would say is that enrollment is now part of everybody's job on campus. And that took a while, but we talk about it at campus-wide gatherings. We talk about it in departments. We talk about it with maintenance staff. And in fact, one of the things we did, we're a union campus. We have 5 unions. We just negotiated the last of 5 contracts, and in every one, we negotiated an enrollment bonus for every one of the employees. So as our enrollment increases, we have that bonus built in. Last slide, please. So that's it. If you have any questions for me, I'm delighted to answer them. If you want to talk to me here or offline anytime to learn more about some of the crazy things we've done. Northern has become, as one student told me the other day, a happening place. And that's done as much for enrollment as anything else that we've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Erickson. That was great. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Cummings, President at the University of Southern Maine. And just a reminder that you can submit questions for either of our panelists through the question box on your webinar control panel. So off to you, Dr. Cummings, and thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you, Dr. Erickson, for a great report. I think we are certainly can reinforce some of the things that Dr. Erickson talked about, and we will, I think, correspond on a lot. I think it would be fair to say that we are perhaps a little bit earlier in the curve than he is, although we are seeing some good enrollment tick up despite some of the demographic challenges. I thought I'd just start by looking at just what those challenges are. Maine's demographic challenges are significant. Let me go to the first slide, Colleen, first substantive slide. Really what we're seeing is the importance of economic growth is really linked to, as we've heard, from using and relying on very productive workers. And if you don't have them, the economy doesn't grow. Next slide. This population cohort, you can see immediately in Maine what the challenges are, but it also has a big implication when we started to analyze what the future meant for us in our strategic plan. when you look at the 16 to 19-year-old population and the 20 to 24-year-old population, significantly down from the more middle-aged populations. So you see 35 to 40, 44, and into the 55, 65. Pretty significant, and we're the oldest state in the nation, and yet at the same time we have the least percentage of college graduates in New England. So what that means is that if we're going to penetrate or expand our market, we have to be able to penetrate into that 25 and older market better than we have, and I'll come back to that. Next slide. Yeah, you can see here that when you're looking at enrollment, the actual workforce enrollment that we see in terms of Maine's public schools from 95 through 2012, a pretty significant drop overall in the number of students. So we at about 2002, we had something in the range per class of about 17,000 students. Today we have 13,000 students. So just in a decade and a half, a pretty sizable 18.5% decrease in the size of those classes. Next slide. And this just sort of says it. I think both Maine at -12, New Hampshire at -14. These are projections into fall of 2026. And pretty comparable challenges to what you see in Michigan, a little sharper even than what you see in Michigan. Next slide. And for population of 20 plus years of age, some college degree, no degree, 2010 and 2015, we're seeing a larger percentage. So the irony is, as we're losing people, we're seeing a over 6% increase in those 25 plus years of age with some degree but no college degree. So there's a market there which we are looking at how we can penetrate that. Next slide. And actually I'll skip that one, thanks. Next one. And this is an intriguing slide for us. These are teenagers between 16 and 19 who are not attending school and not working, and that number creeps up or stays consistent. We have about 7% or 4,000 students that we're looking at. Is there a way for us to drive better marketing and approaches with K-12 schools to get that population between 16 and 19 that are not attending schools, but maybe not attending schools because they not because they can't do academic work, but because of another bunch of host of reasons, and I'll come back to that as well. So I think there's one last slide I had on our demographics. You can see here that from 18 to 24, that number actually, of course, grows, and now you're talking about not attending school, not working, and no degree beyond high school. That's 13,000 individuals that are out there with a severe cost to the economy. So those are pretty sizable things for us in terms of challenges for the state. And so what does a university like ours do about that? How can we take advantage of it? How can we penetrate into some of these markets? I want to kind of emphasize some of the things that Dr. Erickson so well said. One was that we had to do a strategic plan, and in that strategic plan we began to refocus our mission and what it meant for both enrollment and retention. We did a survey of students who we felt would be helpful in understanding where the university was, and quite frankly, some of these students were ones that decided not to come here or students that left. And so we commissioned a study to actually go after these students, and they told us three really important, sometimes not really easy things to listen to be honest, but they became the center, the linchpin for our strategic plan. And the first one is that, and I think it was mentioned or referred to in Dr. Erickson's work, is that I need somebody at the university who knows me, likes me, believes in me and advocates for me, that there was a feeling of we're a big business, but there wasn't a lot of connection. So we have done some things to immediately change that. I'll talk about that as well. Secondly, they said you've got to be more competitive scholarship-wise, and so we began to repackage our scholarships, doing combinations of different strategic elements to get both out-of-state students and in-state students here at a higher percentage. And finally, they said something that really works to our advantage as well, and that was around we need to have the added value of our education. It is absolutely primary that we have experiences in real-world, small, medium, large-sized businesses. We need to be in hospitals. We need to be in K-12 schools. We need to be in a series of nonprofits, government agencies, things that will add value to our education on a level that we would not otherwise get. So don't just lock us in classrooms for 4 years. We really need that change. So let me go through what we did. So those three things became the backbone of our strategic plan, and we began to develop a set of strategies around each of those. So in terms of know me and connect with me, a major overhaul of our advising system and requirements around and push both at the faculty level and professional advisors. This year we had about a 3.3% increase, overall enrollment increase, which is a good sign for us given some of the demographic challenges. And part of that was a result of really finding ways to keep students here from one year to the next. And we took all 1,800 new incoming students and had one-on-one 90-minute individual orientations with them. In those orientations, we said things that sometimes, especially first-generation students, don't have the opportunity to hear at home. Specifically, college can be difficult, but we have lots of resources to help you through that. First, know that you need to make a major commitment in time. You can't be working X amount of hours, etc. Sort of kind of a very honest conversation with them about the depth and the substance of what they were, the gravitas of what they were taking on, but saying that everyone struggles with a financial aid issue they weren't expecting, a roommate that they don't get along well with, a professor that doesn't exactly inspire them. All those things are normal. The question is, what would you do about it? We gave them the tools in these 90 minutes and began to make those personal contacts and then followed up with them. And our retention has really moved forward over the last 2 years since we've been doing this. The second thing we began to do around scholarships, which was what we heard, is we began packaging in different ways. One is we'd never given scholarships for transfer students, and they turn out, as you can imagine, in many cases to be your best students, especially ones that might be coming out of an associate's degree in which they now know what they're doing, they have academic confidence, they have a sense of who they are as a learner, and they know what they want in terms of a career. And those are good students to invest in, so we've been investing in some scholarships there. We also took down all barriers from the community colleges to transition here. So once they had the associate's degree, we simply said, you no longer have an application fee, simply come as long as your transcripts show that you have that you have your degree and that it's paralleled in the 25 programs in which we have a given pathway. And we minimized the obstacles and created advisors that were specifically for transfer students, particularly for the community college, but in general as well. The final piece that let me stay with scholarships for just a second. We also began to move into strategic negotiations with price point in certain states. So with our two brothers and sisters of Vermont and New Hampshire right beside us, we moved to a Mountains to the Sea scholarship in which we matched any of the tuition rates that they would have paid at their public schools. We matched them and gave them that same in-state rate here if they came down to the ocean, and so that program has seen a strong increase in out-of-state students coming out of those two states and other states as well. And the final piece of the refocused mission was our use of our natural assets, which Dr. Erickson talked about being on a lake. We're on the ocean. 3 magazines have said that the city of Portland is one of the best small cities in America, and one of the top 3 small cities in America. Very attractive. Unemployment rate is low. That helps us tremendously with being able to get to students opportunities because of the thriving economy. We've been able to set up internships, co-ops, job shadowing experiences, clinicals, etc., for every student. So when I came here 2 years ago, we had only 39 of our 50 programs that even had an internship option. Today we have all 50 of them committed. Over the last 2 years, we've given a number of incentives and some prodding to all programs to be able to get us to that internship pathway. And as a result, our juniors and seniors are actively involved in co-op experiences in the junior and senior year, which gives us a chance to say, we are the largest metropolitan area not north of Boston, in northern New England, I should say. And by doing that, we have at least the ability to really give them something that they might not be able to get, certainly in other places in the state and in northern New England. So we have a vibrant asset in our town. Interestingly enough, our actual campus for residential campus is about 11 miles to the west, closer to the mountains, which is not unattractive. It's a historic campus, but it's not the vibrancy that particularly our upperclassmen want. And so Dr. Erickson's team is much further ahead on the rebuilding of the campus. In fact, I plan to talk to him about a couple of things, especially that university center. But our plan, which has now been approved by the Board of Trustees, is that we will move forward in a major renovation of our Portland campus, doing a stronger connection, particularly for upperclassmen who want to be in the Portland, Maine area, but often can't afford the price point. And we know that there's a market based on several studies that we have, that there is a strong and strategic advantage for us to start moving our Portland campus into less of a commuter campus and much more of a residential program that will attract students, particularly upperclassmen. A couple things I'll add to that in terms of the last piece, which is what we call the added value of their education. We got several local companies to support paid summer internships for every student in the campus that wants to be here. We reorganized our corporate engagement, which we've never really had here before. We reorganized so that we have a vice president of corporate engagement that drives home the internships that I had mentioned to you previously, and then we offered paid summer internships so that people could stay here in the Portland area and get job opportunities that result in pay and revenue for them. And finally, we started talking about recruitment. We've been really working on how do we develop a strategy around adults, and so we did push stronger online, and we've seen a big increase in the number of adults that we are doing, particularly hybrid courses in this area. For Maine, this area has the highest sort of population density, so we have an advantage there. We've been recruiting into the adult market much stronger than we have before, because they often want, what we're finding is that it's not always fully online, but certainly hybrid courses or mixed courses are extremely popular, and we've found new ways to use the entire cycle, not just the fall and spring semester, but the winter and summer semesters as well, to be able to build on that hybrid approach. So we're seeing an uptick in the upper sort of higher level demographics into that 30, 40, and 50-year-old group that I had mentioned to you before. I will also underscore the advent of a chief diversity officer here, and working on New Americans as a refugee site. We're seeing that people of color are one of our fastest growing next to out-of-state students that we have, and learning to be inclusive and be diverse is certainly something that we feel very, very strongly about and are working on a number of levels, which I can talk about if those questions come up. And I'll just sort of finish by saying that with that strategic plan came a major remarketing and rebranding. What was something that at first I was a little suspicious of it. It seems to have worked extremely well. Branding around the University of Everyone and building on the strengths of having people who are 35, 45-year-old veterans, as well as single mothers and lots of 18 and 24-year-olds as a strength in really embracing that diversity, et cetera. So that branding made me a little nervous because everybody in America wants to feel a little special, so I thought University of Everyone might not give that specialness. It turned out to be kind of a winner. We've not only heard anecdotally that they like that advertising, but that it really does sharpen our strength as a university. So with that, I will turn it back over. There's much more to talk about, but I think our strategic plan became the pathway for us to sort of go after this. It's also important for me to say that 36 months ago, the year before I came in, that there were major cutbacks here that did restrict us from and had a significant impact on faculty, so I think perhaps unlike Northern Michigan, who wisely, slowly did cutbacks over a decade-long period, we had sort of avoided it here for quite a long time and had ultimately about 24 direct retrenchments of faculty and another 24 retirements and about 119 staff members. So it was a pretty seismic hit for us. So I don't want to exaggerate where we are here, but the rebuilding seems to be going well. We've had 4 straight semesters of enrollment growth. Our finances are now regained a solid footing, and philanthropy is up considerably. So we certainly have done well in the last 2 years, but only after a very, very painful set of punches from the financial impact of lower demographics, which is the topic today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Colleen and be glad to answer any questions that might surface.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings, for that discussion of your guys' strategic plan and how you guys are continuing to advance the public college mission amid your population loss. So we do have time for a couple questions, so please do continue to submit those into the control panel. We do have one question coming in, Dr. Cummings, regarding your transfer policy and the eligibility of students for that. The question was wondering if that's only available for Maine students with an associate's degree, and I think that's regarding that transfer scholarship that you discussed.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no, it is part of the Maine Community College System alignment. We have not done that out of state, although that's a fantastic idea, but we have not done the alignment outside the state.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Erickson, I want to come back to you. And you mentioned a little bit about getting in with the governor and the Michigan Economic Council, but to what extent do you see legislators viewing the demographics in Michigan as a challenge to the vitality of public colleges in your state? And what remedies or responses have they offered? And if there's any other stakeholders, such as your governing boards and system offices, that also view demographics as a challenge and provide opportunities to address some of the issues that arise from the changing demographics.
Well, a couple of things. Michigan is somewhat unique in that we do not have a state system. So each of the 15 publics are constitutionally autonomous. And so no system, the pros on that model are I don't have to go ask anybody. I just have to convince 8 people appointed by the governor that this is a direction we want to go, and away we go. And I've always considered that a real advantage for us. But what it also means is that I have to spend a lot of time in our state capital trying to help educate and engage with legislative leaders, and that's a very important part of what we do. And I have to say it has been challenging. I think those folks understand there are demographic declines, but it's been hard for them to really wrap their head around what that really means. And so lately I've been commenting about the fact that in the state of Michigan we've had 39 school districts, 39 high schools that have reduced their high school football teams from 11-man football to 8-man football. And for some reason, that simple statistic seems to resonate with people. The challenge, of course, is that the state faces a lot of different challenges. We have road issues, we have prison issues, we have budget issues, and it's difficult for people to get higher education at the top of the list. But with all of that said, I would say that we are fortunate to have great legislative support. Our local legislators are very good about helping us. We have a state resource officer that spends most of her time in the state capitol advocating for all of public higher education and certainly for Northern. And that's paid off in a whole series of investments that have come through various departments and various entities within the state government.
Thank you. And Dr. Cummings, I'm going to go to you on this and then circle back to Dr. Erickson if we have time. But you discussed your strategic plan, and I was wondering in terms of who are the key actors on your campus that you leverage in carrying out the strategic plan?
Well, thank you, and I think we're the opposite of Dr. Erickson at Northern Michigan, in which we are part of a larger system, the University of Maine system. So we have a flagship university. We're the second largest of the 7, and a series of smaller campuses. So you first have to enlist whatever major strategic plan you're going to take on. You have to enlist the Board of Trustees at the state level. And most of in terms of the resource acquisition, most of that has to go through the Chancellor's office, who will be the major conduit to the legislature and the governor. I do play some role in that, but I think it's more a little idiosyncratic just because I served in the legislature for quite a while, so I can be a little bit of a help to him on most days. And I think that the legislature and the Chancellor's office and the Board of Trustees are sort of the people sort of above us that we have to be extremely careful and have to work with them first before we can move on a strategic plan. Then internally, obviously, we have our own major network here in the state. Businesses, because we are kind of the economic engine of the state, we end up having the ability to work closely with businesses who can advocate for us, and those have been a major support in many of the things that we're going to do, both the scholarships and the added value component of the internships and those kind of things that help sizably increase the value of their education. So those turned out to be great external stakeholders and here, or local stakeholders here that are actually outside the university. And then finally, bringing the students into that strategic plan, asking them what their concerns were about being here, turned out to be a major help in building something I think has been very, very effective. And of course, bringing the faculty to a place where after all of the budget cuts that we had, a lot of healing had to go on. And so, for them to jump onto a new plan, they had to feel like they had a lot of control over it, and that they understood, I think perhaps even better than they did before, why things like economic discipline and a growth model for all departments was essential. So those are the immediate key stakeholders that have helped us kind of get things off the ground from mission to operations.
Great, thank you. And we have just about a couple more minutes that I want to wrap up with any closing remarks that either of you have, starting with you, Dr. Erickson. Anything you want to share with the audience about how you continue to carry out your mission and moving forward?
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'd leave you with, I think one of the most important things we've done over the last 3 years has continued to push a positive message. And I think when people feel good about the university and when people feel good about the community and good about the work they're doing, it resonates. And that positive message, I think, is really, really important. And so even on days when I'm, facing a budget cut and dealing with a student crisis, think it's important for all of us to be extremely positive and supportive. So that's the last thing I would leave the group with, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Cummings, if you have anything that you want to add briefly before we wrap up.
You know, I'd build on that. I really appreciated what was just said. The idea that you can do something, the belief that you can, is really the fundamental component that I've seen in organizational development and personal development in terms of actual change. The other thing I would add to that is that, you know, not only being positive, but being willing to to really ask people to step up. You know, the biggest thing you can do is to honor them with, "We need you right now," and that has been a very big component. And when you're at the top of your game, you do start to see these results that I think you've seen in both universities.
Great. Thank you very much for both of you for being here and sharing the strategic plans and how your institutions are continuing to carry out your mission. That concludes our webinar for today. And I would also like to provide a big thank you to ASKU for co-sponsoring this webinar and bringing us all here together today. So thank you and have a great day. And there will be a survey when you exit the webinar, so please submit that so we can further meet your needs in webinars. Thanks.